also we push each other, right? Like, I will say, like, there are times when I've checked out, and I think there are times when you've checked out, and we both we cover each other and we push each other to make sure that the podcast keeps going smoothly, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice having a partner, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
Where the podcast that chronicles the past and present of the fighting game community and bring on various perspectives from Arizona. You can find us on Twitch. We go live at twitch.tv/Spiral Series, on YouTube at youtube.com/Spiral Series, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. This is episode 12, and this is another episode featuring drinks. My name is Benny, also known as AK Grandmaster B, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who I hear hosts some killer karaoke parties. How's it going, John?
Pretty good.
Nice.
That's something that my fiance and I do probably once every quarter. Quarter sounds like it's a business thing, but more like like every couple of months we're just like, we'll turn our living room into a karaoke machine, basically. Like, well, I'll bring my computer out and plug all the sound equipment that I actually use for this podcast into my TV, and then turn the TV into a giant karaoke machine.
Nice.
And then when there's usually drinks and stuff like that too, and pizza and stuff. But actually, one of the drinks that we had at the last karaoke party, and that I'm drinking leftover right now, is this Voodoo Ranger IPA. And so,
nice.
I'm going to be having that on our drinks episode today.
No IPA for me. I got a Arizona peach tea.
Ooh.
That's
those were in the news recently because everything's been going up due to inflation recently, and the owner for Arizona Iced Tea said we're gonna keep it at 99 cents because everyone else in the world is going through a hard time right now. There's no reason for tea to go up, and I was like, wow, that's super cool.
Yeah, I guess it's like the whole like Costco thing, right? The Costco hot dogs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not gonna upgrade this at all, or we're not gonna increase the price at all, right? This is $1.50 for a hot dog and a drink.
Yeah. It's. And they're making money elsewhere. They're all still posting record profits, but I'm glad that they're thinking about that kind of stuff. It's good PR ultimately, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a loss leader. We'll lose some money on some hot dogs, fountain drinks, whatever. But
but you got them in the store, man. Yeah, loss leader. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yep, exactly.
So our episode today is a little bit looser structured. It's a drinks episode, and to the point where we don't have a guest, and we're basically just going to talk about whatever's on our minds. We spoke a little bit before starting the taping of this episode, and we agreed that we were going to keep the fighting game talk to a minimum this time. There was like, the reality here is like, I've been kind of busy and haven't played a ton of fighting games in the past couple of weeks. I've played a couple matches here and there, and I've definitely absorbed a lot of the Street Fighter 6 news, but I've been doing a lot of other fun stuff and trying to I guess deal with the pandemic and how it's not ended, but it kind of like we are going out again and trying to do new things, and so I'm trying to explore and try new hobbies and stuff. And I imagine you're trying some new hobbies too, right, Benny?
Yeah. I mean, like same with you. Like, we did start playing Cross Tekken for a little bit, and then like, I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's like, I think I was just trying to find something to play, but then at the same time, like, I don't have a ton of time, so like, I end up kind of going back to playing other games. Like, I go back to playing Tetris. I've been back to playing Slay the Spire again. Like, that just
me
seems
too.
To be like a cyclical thing for me. Like, every few months, I'm just like, all right, I don't want to play this right now. Then it's just like, let me get a run in, and then all of a sudden that turns into, oh man, I've been playing this for like the last hour, and I could play it daily now. So it's just like,
yeah, those roguelikes in particular are pretty good at that. Of like, I have a self-contained like 20-minute run, and so if I'm if I'm a a middle-aged gamer or with responsibilities and whatnot, and I only
Yeah.
have a very small amount of chunk of time, a roguelike is perfect for that because it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end all in one session. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I don't feel that need to like commit a ton of time to it, or just even like because before I used to play religiously, kind of like 9 p.m. Play with friends at night, and we'd
Hmm.
play for like 3 hours, and then it's just like, okay, I just spent 3 hours playing games. Whereas now it's just like, yeah, I still want to play something, but maybe for like 30 minutes, and then I want to go watch something with my kids or something, and it's just like, I like you said, like that whole kind of beginning, middle, end, and like I'm done. Like, okay, that segment's done, right? Like,
You know those 3 hours that 3 hour sessions you used to have. Those would be on like Xbox Live, and you'd be playing a shooter or something, right? Or like a
yeah,
racer or
exactly.
something.
Yeah,
Like basically, like you'd have a social group that you start an Xbox Live party with every night, and then you just hop on and hang out with them, right?
yeah.
I had a similar experience with a couple different games, and I feel like you got to wonder like do you think that's a product of the time in the industry or the time of you as a person? And what I mean by that is like is that because you were younger and you had more social time with friends and whatnot, and you guys were into the same stuff, and now you're older and you have kids and you have more responsibilities, and so that's why that's not happening? Or is that because Microsoft's not the leader anymore in online gaming?
I think it's a little bit of all of that, and then also just like my work schedule, because me working at nights, like really kind of interfered with everything.
Hmm.
Because like, yeah, I like I said, 9 p.m. That's basically when I'm leaving for work nowadays, other than my days off. So it's kind of hard, especially like trying to play games where like you're trying to progress together, like
Hmm.
that. You want to coordinate and play together, but then like if I'm only playing twice a week, a lot of the times friends wouldn't want to wait for me. So it's just like I come back and I'm like, hey, where are you guys at in this game? And they're so far ahead, and I was just like, it kind of takes you out from wanting to play that at all. And it's just like, yeah, well, I guess I'll just stop playing this since you guys have progressed so far ahead of me. So, it's a little bit of that, and then like you said, just kind of doing other things, and um, not really the responsibility of having kids, because as my kids have gotten older, they've become more independent. So it's like, yeah, we still try to have time for each other, but then at the same time, like my son G, like he's playing games on his own. My daughters are busy with homework or doing other like side schoolwork or things like that, or just personal projects that they have. So I don't know. It's kind of like, in a way, kind of freed up more time, but then at the same time, like I don't have that social aspect with some of my other friends like I did before,
Yeah,
or that
I get that.
availability.
And obviously we have the last 2 years to thank for as like to accelerating some of those social circles shrinking, right? I you know that you're everyone's social circles shrink as they get older, right? But for me, like it feels like I've aged 10 years with the way this pandemic has gone. Oh
Yeah,
man.
I mean, yeah. And then the thing with like the kind of like, I mean, like you said, the pandemic kind of like, people wanted to get out more. Like for me, my focus has shifted from like wanting to could go online and play games and go out and interact with people, whether that's having a couple of drinks somewhere or just eating and just kind of you know cultivating that part of my life.
Sure.
Because like you said, like the last couple of years we haven't seen each other or been in each other's presence. So it's just like Zoom meetings or Google Meet or whatever you have, FaceTime, like that can only do so much. And like I want to meet up with people and hang out with them and talk to them that way.
Yeah, I mean, like even like Benny, you and I have hosted. We're on episode 12 now. I don't think I've actually
Yeah,
seen you in 3 years. Um,
yeah,
like I don't think I've seen you in person since we got vaccinated and stuff. Like I just I haven't been going out, and I know you have, but like it's been kind of a
yeah. It's like
hard adjustment on my
sporadic.
end. Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like even this is our Zoom meeting, right? This podcast is our way
Yeah,
of interacting with each other. Like I will say that our friendship has grown quite a bit since we started this podcast, and I think
yeah,
that like when I remember when you first like do you want to talk a little bit about some of the origins of the podcast on this episode?
yeah,
Would that be cool?
yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
like how this started was like Benny messaged me and was like, "Hey, I thought you were interested in doing a podcast at some point. That's something that I'm interested in doing too." And so then the ball started rolling after that, and we kind of put together our two different styles, and like I've got some of the technical mindset. He's got the narrative mindset and the host mindset, and so we were able to put those together and form this thing. Um,
Yeah,
but I think fundamentally it was based around because sorry, the whole reason why I got on this topic is because one of your opening suggestions for this was, can we do this in person? Can we do the podcast in person? Like I'll come over once a week or something and we'll just record it because you have the
yeah,
equipment and stuff there. And I turned that down because I said I would rather do it remotely.
yeah,
For one, for safety's sake, because I was at the time I was still paranoid about the pandemic. Um,
yeah,
but then also like this format seems to be really convenient for a lot of people, and what I
yeah,
see a lot of all the top YouTubers and streamers and podcasters do is they do this video format instead. I think by and large, like because of the pandemic, the two talking heads in a rectangles format has really like taken off as far as like this is an okay YouTube video. This long form content of a 2 hour YouTube video that someone can just leave on, like
yeah,
that's acceptable content now, right? So I think just by and large we're all okay with this. Like I saw a Disney documentary the other day where they filmed it very clearly work from home, but they did it in a very tasteful way and organized the camera shots right, and it was all the same shot. It's all mug shots, right? Where they're just sitting here like
yeah.
this. But
Shoulders, yeah,
yeah, I don't know.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, yeah. I agree, man. I mean, yeah, like I've seen some videos or some clips or whatever on Instagram of like people that are like literally like sitting in a studio or sitting in a room together,
Yeah,
and it's just like that has its own benefits in some ways, but it's just like the like you said, the talking heads and and rectangles kind of thing,
yeah,
like that has its benefits too, and flexibility and being able to maybe talk to people that maybe we wouldn't be able to talk to in person just because of logistical reasons. Like, do you think you could make it up to this at this time, and
yeah,
having to kind of plan all that out?
yeah.
So yeah, that
Like
definitely has
even
its
that
benefits.
actually, the guest thing. Do you think we would have actually been able to get this off the ground if we did it in person? Do you think we would have been able to get anybody to come out and talk to us?
Um, Maybe some people initially, but I think it would have been a lot more difficult to kind of organize that and keep it on schedule. Because I mean, at least remotely, I guess we can
Yeah,
uh, kind of salvage some things, right? If somebody couldn't make it, right?
yeah.
Whereas it'd be. I mean, I guess you could still kind of do that in person, but it would be maybe a little bit more awkward. I don't know.
Fair enough. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
it's just like I don't know the whole idea, like you were talking about, like getting this started, like it kind of stemmed from because when I'm working, I'm basically like out on the road all night, and
Yeah,
I was getting tired of listening to music, so I started asking people for podcast recommendations, and um, I think it started actually from like Twitter after the Super Bowl. After the Rams won the Super Bowl, I saw some clip, and it was just like, "Hey, we interviewed so and so on our podcast," and of course, I'm naturally interested in like listening to this coach talk about whatever.
yeah,
So that started me. That was like the first podcast that I listened to. Like I'd never listened to really anything at all. So I started with that, and then the more I listened to it and the whole interview kind of style and doing that kind of thing, I was just like, this brings me back to one, like you said, like I remember you mentioned it in passing. It was just like, hey, I think I want to kind of start a podcast, but you didn't really kind of like delve into like what you wanted to do,
yeah. I
and
can go
then
into that too, but after
yeah,
you're
and
done.
then
Okay.
just yeah, then just the other thing was that I had a friend from Alaska that was kind of doing a similar thing, just in
Mm.
terms of like interviewing people from the Alaska gamer scene, the AKG scene.
Oh, really?
And I remember he had reached out to me because I had left Alaska in 2012, and it was just like, hey, I'm talking to kind of the OGs of our scene kind of thing, and I wanted to talk to you. So
Nice.
for me, that was kind of just a natural extension. It's just like, hey, I want to do something like this. I don't want to do it by myself, which is why I reached out to you because I figured like I want to do it with a co-host because that's the podcast I was listening to is the Pivot. They have three people on, but it was just like having different people on, different perspectives, that kind of thing, and then like yeah, then just kind of taking that same idea from like the Alaska thing my friend was doing, and then just taking it to where I'm at now with Arizona, and that's something that's relatable to you too, that you're part of.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I actually I don't know if you told like did you tell me that when we first started? Because I don't remember. But
I think I mentioned in the passing. Maybe it's
yeah,
probably like
I
in a
might have.
Facebook message somewhere.
I feel like you might have told me that, and I just glossed over it. But so there's like a whole sister show that does something similar to what we're doing here.
Well, he's not doing it anymore. It was like I
Oh,
don't know, maybe he got like 6 episodes in or whatever.
yeah,
And like to be honest, like the like the the audio video quality like stuff wasn't really great. This was like years ago when he did it. I
yeah,
just remember like him like being on there and him interviewing me from home and asking me about stuff and like elaborating on like Evo's moments and things like that.
yeah. Okay, that's cool. Um, the reason why I think about that is because like, uh, well, rather I did something similar to that earlier on, where I talked a lot about how I used to run Ranbats, or like that's come up over the course of several episodes, right? And one of the things I did was run a highlight reel show as like a companion show after the day after the Ranbats. And I was so fucking crazy to be doing this when I was in my 20s because like it just took so much time and I didn't think about it. But we would hold the Ranbat or the tournament, and it would be at TGZ. So at that time, they were in their old location and they didn't have setups, and so I would bring my computer, 3 monitors, 3 Xboxes, and then barter with the community to bring an additional two setups, and they would be dependent on the game. Like I remember, like I could get Abe to bring his setup for Cross and only Cross, and then had somebody who would be able to bring KI but it was an Xbox One, so that's all you could play on it, right?
Yeah.
So I'd barter with them and to kind of backfill that, and so I'd be hauling all that shit around my stream, my compute, my setups, all that other stuff with T Dot and everybody and the whole Spiral Series crew. And we'd get back at night. Maybe I would do Denny's with everybody afterwards with all the shit in my car. Um, and then that following day on Sunday, I remember dedicating that day specifically to cutting video for the stream, uploading it, and then I realized that I could hold a show with that footage. And so I held this show called the Spiral Series Highlight Reel, which would be it's on the YouTube channel that if you're watching this on YouTube, it's on the same channel. It's way earlier. This is like 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would have a guest uh host. It wouldn't be a guest interview, it'd be a guest host, and then we would do a player spotlight, and the player wouldn't even actually be on the on the show. It would just be like an image of them and some quick facts, and they basically made it like a PowerPoint presentation. And but the point is, like, I got to do player highlights back then, and I got a good idea of like what it meant to host a show on the internet. And so I had been doing that, and after a while, like I stopped running Ranbats, and so that show ended up drying up because I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to run Ranbats anymore. um and so but that skill set that I learned from doing that, I applied to here. And so when we started this podcast, it was a lot of the questions are like, well, what's the format going to be? Well, how are we going to do this? Like, do we have 3 people talking about the same thing? Do we have 2 people talking about the same thing? Do we have guests at all? And then, is it about history? Is it about current events? Is it about whatever hot YouTuber topic is going on right now? That kind of stuff. And I think one of the big portions of it was like we want to chronicle history and we want to do interviews, and that's where like the player highlight thing really came in handy. And we were able to organically take some of our own strengths, like your ability to tell stories. And I have a uh I haven't it sounds kind of braggy, but like I really like interviewing people. Like at my jobs and stuff, I liked testing folks to see like if they could if they had the technical aptitude, but then also seeing if they could work with the team chemistry wise. Like a lot of the same like job interview skills I found are actually applicable to this podcast. And it's kind of crazy because I'm like, I know what they want to say. I know like that they're passionate about a particular thing. They're just waiting to be asked about it. And then I found that to be the case over the time talking with Jeff and Scott and yourself. Like we have a group chat that we talk in, and the initial idea was I want to host a single show with OGs. I wanted to put Jeff and Scott in a room and put it on my stream because at the time I had been streaming a lot more. This is 2020 now. It's time skip to 2020. I started streaming again because there's nothing better to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, what if I put these guys in a room together and we just talk history, and we talk about game mechanic history, we talk about AZ history, all this other stuff. But it never took off because didn't I didn't really like figure out how to organize it. I didn't have all the logistic stuff. I don't have the narrative charismatic personality that you have. And so it really like, I don't know, it meshed really well together. So when you and also we push each other, right? Like I will say, like, there are times when I've checked out, and I think there are times when you've checked out, and we both just we cover each other and we push each other to make sure that the podcast keeps going smoothly, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice having a partner, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think we complement each other really well. And even in terms of like just like the whole kind of setup of this, like, you're doing a lot of like the technical stuff in terms of like setting up the stream, hosting the stream on your channel, and like, even doing like you did all the legwork for in terms of like putting it on, was it Audible or not Audible?
Anchor,
What's that thing called? Anchor.
Anchor,
Yeah,
yeah.
put Anchor.fm. And then like I remember after that first episode, you were like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna post it on Spotify." And then like I remember seeing it on Spotify like within 24 hours, and I'm just like, "Holy shit! Like John did all this stuff already." Like I was expecting maybe like a week out, like it'd be online, and like pretty much every time we do something like within 24 hours, like you have it edited or whatever and posted online, and I'm just like, "Oh man, like he's on top of it. Like this is exactly um the kind of partner that I needed. It's like like I wouldn't say like I don't have a lot of time, but it's just like that's something that I think caters a lot to your strengths. So it's kind of like
The
really
technical
helps
side.
me out in terms of that. Yeah, the technical side of it is like you doing all that kind of stuff and doing that stuff in the background really kind of helped me out in terms of that. And like you had like you said, you were streaming, so like that's something that you were real comfortable with. Like I've streamed here and there, but like I didn't have anywhere near like the kind of like setup and the layouts and the stuff and that like you were doing on your channel. So
Yeah.
it's a good pairing.
So I guess this podcast is kind of turning into, or the episode rather, is kind of turning into like an autobiographical thing, or a little bit more about Benny and I. For the record, we went in with a slight plan, but not a huge plan about what we were going to talk about today. But I will say, like, one of the things that it was after our first episode, I think. I sent it around to our group chat and to a couple of my friends' groups because I was on cloud nine after our first or second episode when we really started hitting our stride, and not started hitting our stride, but when we got it off the ground rather. And
Yeah.
I was excited about it, and I forget my point. Oh, right, it was I remarked to our friends that how I was amazed that all of the things that I like doing in my life kind of coalesced into this podcast. And what I mean is, like, I really so at the beginning of this episode, you said I throw karaoke parties, right?
Yeah.
So I have all the sound equipment. I have sound equipment. I frankly, I you can see it in the background here. I play music. I've written my own music. I've mixed my own music. I've done a lot of sound stuff in the background, and so podcasts, I could just reuse all of it. I'm
Yeah.
literally reusing all of it. Reusing all the equipment, the sound system stuff, all the mixing stuff, and the fact that we're streaming this, like, it's weird. Like, I like fighting games too, and I like streaming, and like all this stuff just kind of married together. And I like video editing too, and that's something that I did as a kid. Which is another thing that I don't think anyone knows, but yeah, growing up, I had my own video game fan site, and I learned how to code through that. But I also did video editing, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, like my dad taught me how to do it. Actually, my dad taught me how to use Adobe Premiere, which was a really rare thing. I don't know anybody else's dad who taught them that. um, so I guess, yeah, you mentioned 24 hours, right? Like, for our podcast episode, from air date to um,
Yeah,
uh,
being available. Yeah.
being available, right? Is so the streaming thing was me forcing that on our group here, saying, like, I don't really know how to do the traditional podcast stuff, but I do know how to stream an episode, and I know how to take that video and turn that into something we can upload. And
Yeah.
so um, that's a big reason why we do it live. That's a big reason why there's blemishes in our audio sometimes, or there's mix. Like, actually, I have done my fair share of editing though. Like, I've actually cut things. Like there's a whole moment with Rock's episode where, like, he disconnected because his whole signal
Yeah.
died, and then I think you did too. And then
Yeah. Yep.
I ended up cutting all of that out, and I don't know if anybody ever noticed that. It
Yeah,
seemed pretty seamless when I listened to it again, but I need to go listen to it and make sure.
yeah.
But the way the process goes is we shoot the episode at like 5 o'clock on the usual air date, and then we finish around 7 o'clock. And then what my tradition is, I will go to drive to In-N-Out Burger. Always In-N-Out Burger. I don't know why. It's usually it's because we finish around then, and that's the only place that's open that I can get to in a quick amount of time and be able to get back home in time. Um, but what I do is I kick off the rendering for the video, go to In-N-Out Burger, listen to the Twitch archive, and see if there's anything like I can improve immediately. And then come back and then just basically babysit it until the thing's done rendering, and then upload it. And then by that time it's around like, midnight or so. And so right before I go to bed, it's like I just hit the button to say publish, and then we're good. So it's pretty like it does take up the rest of the evening, but I get to go to In-N-Out Burger and then, eat a ton of sodium.
Yeah, because I know, yeah, usually like you said, like right around the end of that night, because like I go to work, like I said, at night at 9
Yeah.
p.m.
Yeah, yeah.
And then like, and we've been doing the podcast on Thursdays, which is, one of my work days. So usually like, I'll get on at 5, like you said. I
Yeah.
get done at 7. That gives me a couple hours to have dinner and hang out with my family a little bit before I got to go to work. And then usually the first half of work, I listen to music or whatever else that I'm listening to. And then eventually, like, I just get that notification, like, oh, it's available now. And I was like, all right, John. So it all, it all kinds of works. Sometimes I listen to it right then when it's available, and I'm just like, hey, if I got nothing else to listen to, just to kind of hear things back. So
There was one
yeah.
episode, I don't think it was Frank's. I think it was the one before Rock. I think might have been Daniel's or Dragon Ninjas, where
Okay, yeah.
I uploaded it, and it uploaded to YouTube, and YouTube it just goes. But
Hmm.
for Spotify or Anchor, you have to upload it and then set up your clip art for the podcast, and then you have to hit the publish button. And I went to bed and I forgot, so I knew the YouTube one was done, and I thought the Anchor one was going to be fine too, and I forgot to hit the button. So I think one episode published a day late, but nobody gave me any shit about it, and I was like, okay, this is good. But now I know. Now I know you're watching for the 24 hours. You got the stopwatch going, so now I gotta keep up the legacy, man. This one will be up by
uh,
11 p.m. tonight. I swear. I'm gonna beat my record.
I'm just gonna put I'm gonna put a timer on, set an
Mhm.
alarm just in case. Like, hey, John, like, it's 5 p.m. the next day. Like, where's the episode?
They have one at In-N-Out Burger in the drive-through, man. They have that big counter at the. I don't know if you can see it in the kitchen at In-N-Out Burger. They have that
Oh
big
yeah,
counter saying how long you've been in line. It's like 30 seconds have passed. Where are my fucking fries?
yeah. So we put it in your room right there. Just put it at the top, and just so it just counts down. Like, oh man, I got 8 hours to go before it hits.
Oh man, it's like some monster version of a sound room. But
Oh
anyway,
man.
to segue awkwardly, because I do know we wanted to talk about at least one other thing on this podcast episode, which is pilot school. Uh, and I was curious about, because we talked about it like last episode. Hey, and at our openings, usually when we're talking about like, what did you do? What did you do this week? Usually, an answer from Benny would be, I have done something to put myself in the air. And so I was curious about, one, your history as far as like why, like when did you start going to pilot school, and then also like how, like where did this come from? Like where did this desire come from? Like what brought you onto this?
Okay, so I mean, pretty much like as a kid, like I didn't watch the Top Gun movie as a kid. Like honestly didn't watch it until I was much older.
Okay.
But I had the Top Gun game, and like I'd always been kind of fascinated with planes, right? Just fighter pilots or fighter planes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I think it's a common dream amongst a bunch of kids. Like I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but then in 5th grade I got glasses, and for a fighter pilot, that's a death knell because like
Yep.
there's this thing about kind of being like the perfect human specimen, right? Like your eyes got to be perfect, this and that. You can't have any health problems because I mean obviously you go into like a combat situation, you can't have corrective lenses, right? Contacts, glasses, like and at the time when I was growing up, we didn't have uh, anything as prevalent like LASIK, those kind of things, right?
Sure.
If there was things like that going on, it was probably tens of thousands of dollars, and it wasn't something like I could go reach out to somebody and go get elective surgery and be like, all right, here's a couple grand, fix my eyes, right? It was like maybe if I was in the military and then my eyes deteriorated, they'd be like, okay, we're gonna cover the cost of this for you because we need you to be in the plane, right?
Sure.
But for me, that was kind of like once I got glasses, it just kind of just exited my mind. Like, okay, well, I guess I'll never be a fighter pilot. And it's weird because like I was living in Alaska, and it's almost like uh, guns and stuff. Like there's so many people that have planes in Alaska. Like I don't know what the
Wait, what?
saying was. Yeah, in terms of just like there's so many people because like float planes and stuff like that. There's a lot of remote areas. There's a lot of people that fly planes in Alaska,
Really?
and like yeah, it's just like for me like it never like connected like oh I could be just a regular pilot, right? For me it was like fighter pilot or nothing else, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then kind of as I grew up, you know, tech was becoming a big thing, IT,
Yeah.
and it was something that everybody was like, "Hey, you need to get into computers and this and this. This is the future." And it's funny because like I almost pursued something like that, and I kind of like didn't do it just because like the cost of college was like way too much and something that my parents were
Sure.
going to help me with. I didn't really want to like put them or put myself in that situation, so I kind of ended up like backpedaling and just putting that kind of stuff on the back burner. But through the years, I played all kinds of like flight games, Crimson Skies. Back in the days, there was these DOS games. Like I think one was called like Falcon 3.0. It was like based on the F-16. Then they had like the Russian counterpart, which is like MiG 29. I forgot the name of the company, but those are two games that I distinctly remember. And then I'd play all these things throughout the years. And um, earlier this year, like I had never thought about, even being in Arizona, right? There's a bunch of small airports around here. You see a bunch of planes flying around all the time. Again, it's something that I like never thought about.
Sure.
And for my 40th birthday earlier this year, Mary, my wife, she kept like, I work at nights, so and my birthday this year was on a Sunday, and she would be asking me, and she'd be like, "Hey, are you gonna be okay if we do something at 9 o'clock in the morning on Sunday on your birthday?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." She's like, "You're not gonna be tired?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine. It's whatever. Let me come home. Let me sleep a couple hours." Because at the time I was getting off at 5 in the morning, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll sleep a couple hours and we can go do whatever." And I wasn't really like, I guess, thinking about what it was. I was more kind of like, just the things I was thinking of was just like, what are we gonna do at 9 in the morning on Sunday? I was like, I don't think people are gonna get up and want to have like a surprise party or have brunch or breakfast or whatever. Like most people just want
She
to
was
sleep
taking you
in
to
or
church,
they
man.
got church, right? Yeah, like people want to go to church. Like they got obligations or this is their day off to relax, right? And
Yeah.
then there was one night I was going to work and she's like trying to show me on her phone like an email and she's like, "This is what we're gonna do." And uh, I kind of blew her off the first time. I was just like, "Oh, we'll talk about this later. We'll talk about it tomorrow." And I kind of left. And then the next day, she was like doing the same thing. She's like, "I really want to know if you're gonna be okay because this is what we're gonna do, right?" And I was
Yeah.
like, so I looked at the phone and I was like looking at it. I'm like skimming through the email and I see Discovery Flight and I'm like, "Oh shit!" And I was like, I just had like the probably the stupidest smile on my face because like I said, like none of this stuff had ever even like uh, come to my mind in terms of like even attempting to do something like that. So I knew like 2 weeks in advance, and then for me, like my birthday, I usually don't like to work on my birthday. So like I ended up taking the night before my birthday because it was gonna roll over in the midnight into my birthday, and then I took the night of my birthday off anyway. So I took 2 days off, and I was just like, screw it. I was just like,
Nice. Yeah.
it's my birthday. This is the one day of the year that uh that I don't want to work.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so we ended up doing that morning, and like yeah, uh I was on cloud nine like when we got there, and she could just like kind of have that. She kept on having this kind of like reassurance thing. She's like, "So are you happy?" And I was just like, I had this like stupid smile on my face like through the whole time, and she's like, "So I did good," and I was like, "Yeah, you did good, you did good."
Your wife put all that together for you because she knew you had a desire to fly someday, and she put so much effort into making sure that day was really special for you. So I think it's really worth calling out the queen bee, Mary
Yeah,
Camacho, for being a badass. Being
yeah. That the and I guess that kind of stemmed because she has a client that she works with that I guess does like flight lessons on the side,
yeah,
and she just goes here and there whenever she has time.
Yeah.
and I guess that's where she kind of got the idea to do it. So yeah, I did that. That was back in May, and
That
then
was May. Okay.
um yeah, and then like for the last few months, like I wasn't, I kept on. I felt kind of. I mean, Mary kind of jokes like I'm her fourth kid anyway, but I kind of felt like a pestering kid because I would be like, "Hey, when do you think I could go fly? Like, when do you think I could go start this?" And
She is just over the moon every time you ask that question, right? Because she knows she's the one who put you on that, right?
yeah, so like, um, I mean, in terms of like the actual flight lessons themselves, I've actually uh stopped doing those right now because like the more I was learning about like kind of like the process to go through doing that.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, there's like a written exam through the FAA you got to do, and a lot of the feedback I got from like Facebook groups and other things that I was reading was like, get that stuff done first. Like, learn like they call it like ground school, and like go through the ground school thing, learn all that stuff, get done with your written exam, and then that way you have all like kind of base knowledge and stuff, and then go start taking flight lessons and start applying that stuff and learning. There's people that do it concurrently, but you know the general consensus I got from a lot of people was to like get that out of the way first, and then there's also like a medical exam you got to get done too. So
Yeah.
that's something that I got to work on.
If I could sidebar briefly, like, that reminds me a lot about the fighting game community, and as far as like what does it take to get into fighting games, and so I don't agree with this mindset, but there is another there's a style out there where they say like if you want to buy a stick to get good at fighting games, buy like just buy a really cheap one and just see if you like it. And if you like
Yeah,
it, then you can buy a better one, right? And that almost seems very similar to the flight school stuff, which is all right. So we have to test your resolve. Basically, we have to see like, do you actually want to do this? Because once you get to a certain point, you're investing a ton of money into this to make sure that you actually want to do this, right? And so it sounds like the ground school and the all the certifications and the background checks and stuff you have to do, like
mm,
that's a good way for you to feel out whether or not this is something you actually want to do, if this is worth sticking with. And if it's not worth sticking with, that's perfectly fine too. Everybody tries something and realizes it's
yeah.
not for them. But I think this is also like a way of making sure this is actually something you want to do, and you're kind of eating your vegetables to make sure you can handle that in the future, you know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then like the other big thing, like I said, there's a medical exam you got to do, and there's like different classes, like a first, second, and a third one. The first one's like
Oh shit.
the the strongest. The first one's like the most strict one. That's the one that you'll need if you want to fly for the airlines eventually.
Okay.
And
Is that
um,
is that on your radar, so to speak? Flying
it's
for an
something that I've
airline?
thought about. Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, you've got to accumulate like 1,500 hours of flying to even be considered for that. So
Okay.
for me, like, um, I've looked at it as more of like if I'm gonna get there, that's probably like maybe 6 or 7 years out, if that, depending on how much time I can actually go out and fly.
Sure.
But basically, like the medical thing, a lot of people were also telling me like get the medical thing done first and get that out of the way because there's a lot of like horror stories in terms of like people that have had problems getting that, and because like pretty much like if you get deferred by the FAA, like the examiner or whatever, like
Hmm.
there's like a lot of stuff that you'd like hoops you'd have to jump through, and like contacting doctors because there's certain things that'll disqualify you, like mental disorders or I saw one where some guy was like he went to like a sleep study thing for sleep apnea, and they got wind of that, and like his application got deferred, and
Yeah.
it was like he had to go back and reach out to the sleep study place or whatever, and basically his diagnosis was like he just snores like a normal person, but to them it was just like, hey, you have a big medical problem that we're worried about,
So
that we
yeah,
don't want to.
small sidebar there is like my friends actually, like I've got a couple friends who have had that same problem where so sleep apnea, like if you talk about like your insurance will cover it if you're like if you work at a good company and your company gives you insurance, which is I know a rarity in America, but um they oftentimes sleep apnea will like sleep studies will be covered. But what ends up happening is that that gets classified as a medical condition, and it turns into a pre-existing condition. And so I have numerous friends who have innocently gone for sleep studies because they want to just improve their lives, like, which
Mm,
sleep is probably a number one place for all of us to improve our lives. And
yeah.
then they get saddled with so many extra fees now because they have a CPAP machine, because now it's a pre-existing condition. And I am not remotely surprised that that would suddenly disqualify you from flying a plane.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Like, yeah.
ugh,
So I mean, yeah, it's a really big thing, and it's not something that I thought about in terms of that. I mean, I don't have any kind of like health problems that I'm concerned about that would cause me a problem for that. But
sure.
it's definitely something where people say get that done and get cleared for that right now before you start investing money into flight lessons, because you could put 20 hours into this, pay all this money, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, I'll go get my exam done now, and then you
Yeah.
get deferred, and it's just like, well, I'm not going to be able to pursue kind of like what I want to pursue. So that's why I've
I,
kind of rolled that back.
I think that's a good that's a good recommendation from the people in the Facebook group then, because it's like,
Mm,
hey, don't get your hopes up right away if you can't actually, like, if something artificial bars you from being able to do this, find that out early rather than go after you've invested all this time into flight lessons, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, it's
yeah,
just like it kind of goes back to like you said, like the whole FGC thing with the stick, because like
yeah,
I've seen, that comes up in our group a lot, and it's just like, hey, I think you should invest $200 or $300 into this nice stick because like you know, it's something that you're going to use all the time, but it's just like, but maybe it's not something I'm going to use all the time. Like it's something I want to kind of see if it's for me,
yeah.
you know.
I've had some arguments with Scott, and not argument with Steve, but like I remember he and I had differing opinions on it, but like about whether or not it's worth, like, if you're joining the FGC, do you buy a fancy stick right away, or do you wait, or do
Yeah.
you buy like a step, like a stick that's like a stepping stone, or do you just
Yeah.
not buy a stick at all, or all those questions. And I'm of the opinion that you should just buy the nicest stick possible, which has a lot of holes in that argument as far as like
Yeah.
affordability and stuff. And I haven't really come to terms with that one yet. Like, what do you like, if you were somebody who was joining the FGC, like, would you recommend that they buy a stick?
Well, I mean, I think it's more of like kind of like it's a more personal kind of thing because, like, for me, like, I know I started with a 360 controller and playing Street Fighter 4 on that, and
Yeah,
then it wasn't until I went to that first tournament and I saw people with sticks, and I was just like, oh man, I didn't even think about that being a thing. And growing up in the arcade scene, I was like, that's something that to me was like just a natural thing. Like the only thing I was worried about was like how long would it take me to get used to this? And for me, it
sure.
was nothing because I was already used to that from playing in the arcades.
It's because
So
you
it
were
was like
playing
the minute I
Honda.
picked it up, yeah, yeah. Charge characters too, and they were like corners. I was like hold corners. I was just like, yeah, this is much easier than holding the D-pad or holding the analog stick, right? So I was just like,
Yeah,
oh man, this whole corner thing, this square gate is just like, I was like, oh man, this is what I need. So
yeah,
for me, that was a natural thing. For somebody that doesn't come from that arcade scene, or that to them it might be like, man, this doesn't feel natural at all, or the motions or whatever, because that's always going to be kind of like a barrier of entry to some people, because it's just like it's just something that's unnatural to them. Like,
sure.
I mean, it depends too, because like my son, like he didn't grow up in the arcade scene. I mean, I've taken him to arcades and like I've introduced that to him and my girls too, and it's something that naturally he's gravitated to, and like he doesn't use pads anymore. He's just like, man, I need to hook up this stick to play Dragon Ball, or I need to do this, right? And
Really,
that's what he uses. Like I have a couple extra sticks, and he's like, when he wants to play fighting games, that's what he gravitates to.
there's something to be said about that, actually, about, because if your son doesn't have like OG baggage, when I say OG baggage, it's literally the ability to play on anything but an arcade stick. And at
Yeah,
the same, so, but he still gravitates towards stick regardless. And so there's got to be
yeah,
some like natural instinctive like benefit to playing on stick. Like, it feels like the games feel more natural on stick than, basically, if that's why he's
yeah,
gravitating towards it.
yeah. Possibly, yeah, I could see that.
Interesting.
I mean, yeah, like I said, I mean, for me, that was just a natural thing. The minute I saw that, like, I was just like, yeah, I need to get one. But for me, like, I didn't buy the most expensive stick. I had that little Mad Catz SE,
Oh, the
And
SE, dude. Yeah, that was a good
yeah,
stick.
I had that one at first, and then I eventually like saved up some money and then got myself one of like the original TEs, and then like branched out into other things. But
For our
yeah, I didn't
listeners,
start out.
just to give a refresher, right? When in 2009, when Street Fighter 4 first came out, Mad Catz partnered with Capcom, and specifically, Mad Catz had an employee who was part of the fighting game community named Mark Julio, and
Yeah,
he was a stick aficionado. Like if you were at the most recent Evo, there was an entire stick museum exhibit, and 3/4 of that exhibit was his personal collection. It was some old and beautiful sticks. It was fantastic to see that. I have pictures. I'll put them on the internet at some point. Um,
yeah,
but all that to say is he was working for Mad Catz at the time, and so he decided to try to popularize or streamline the production of arcade sticks in America, or
hmm
not in America, but the distribution of arcade sticks in America, not production, but distribution. And
yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, so he prototyped or he built out a model for Mad Catz that had Sanwa parts and was high build quality. So we're talking, over $300 for price. And on paper that sounds like a fucking terrible idea, but it was also at the height of the rock band era
yeah,
or the Guitar Hero era, where everybody was buying plastic instruments and plastic peripherals, or the Wii era, everybody was buying those plastic. They were buying peripherals to augment their experience, augment their video gaming experience, right? And so fighting
yeah,
games kind of like nestled in there, and so he prototyped that TE and he prototyped an SE as well, or a standard edition. So there was a tournament edition, which was all Sanwa parts, this big ass, like what a fighting game community member would want for their ideal stick. And it ends up being the best stick for probably,
yeah. A
I
few
don't know.
years, yeah,
I can't think of a better stick, honestly. Even that Cross Tekken stick that came out that was really, really, really tight. Like the TE was more ubiquitous. Um, all that to say though that they he ended up like bringing over this SE stick, standard edition stick, which was a
yeah,
lower end model of the tournament edition, and it didn't include Sama parts. It included
yeah. I didn't have some
knockoff
of them.
parts, right? But you could mod it. Even then,
Yep,
he designed it so that way you could easily open it and then swap out the parts. And man, like that was such a huge thing
yeah.
for an 09er like myself.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what I did. Like, I knew it didn't have like the official parts, but I mean I didn't know anything about the Sanwas and the differences between all that kind of stuff. But it was just like, this will suffice for now. And then eventually, like, yeah, that was my first arcade modding project, was taking out the buttons and that, and like, finding like a what they call it, a Lammy label at the time to put over the
Yeah, Lammy
panel.
label. Yeah, the sticker.
Yeah. Put
Yeah,
the Lammy label. Yeah, I made that first Honda stick with the red and blue buttons. I put the Sanwas in
custom
there. I
art.
swapped out.
Nice. Do you
Yeah, I
still have
swapped
that
out the.
stick?
No, actually, that one got destroyed in a fit of rage one time. Xbox Live.
On Xbox Live. So you were partying with your friends in the evening, like we were talking about earlier,
No,
right?
no, no. That was just me by myself, because like I didn't really have like, I mean, I had my Alaska friends I'd play Street Fighter with, but a lot of times at home, like it'd be like, oh, let me load up a ranked match.
Sure, yeah.
And there was one game, I don't even remember the character that they played or whatever. They did something that just like completely like pissed me off. And I took it and I literally did like a Sanford Kelly and like threw it on the ground. And then I looked at it and I was just like, the panel had fallen off the back and stuff, and I was like, oh man, why did I do that? But
You know,
yeah, that was my first stick. Yeah, like I said, I swapped out all the parts for Sanwa.
nice.
Ever since then I've been Sanwa. I've tried other things, but I've always just gone back to the Sanwa JLF and stuff like that. That's just what I'm most comfortable with.
Sure.
So yeah, that was that was my first project. I have pictures of it still, but yeah, that stick is no longer in existence.
I love how I talk up the SE and the TE as these beautiful like engineering pieces of art, and then you're like, yeah, I broke it, I fucked it up, I got really angry one day. I'm like, you could mod it, you could open it up from the bottom, you could put in these custom plus buttons, and then, like it'll just be like it'll sing, and then also you'll just throw it on the ground when you're done. Oh man, that's awesome. But yeah, that was a whole thing too. As far as like my original question to you was, does a fighting game member need to buy a stick, right? And
Yeah,
I also think that there's a social stigma to it too. At least at my end of it, when I was first joining the scene, it was a good cross of like OGs versus new players. Nowadays, it's more new players and OGs are a minority. But
Yeah.
um, I remember like feeling the pressure to have a stick to fit in. I remember that very, very, very much. Like I had a PlayStation stick. I had a Mad Catz TE. I'm not gonna lie. Like I went in and bought the Cadillac, um, but it was a PlayStation stick, and everybody played on Xbox. So you're like, what do
Yeah.
you do? You're like, how do I have the stick, but it's just slightly off, so I might not fit in. Then what if they find out? Like, there's all kinds of those kinds of questions that were going through my head as somebody who's entering a new social circle. And so I went through
Yeah.
all the fucking uh, awful things about getting that thing dual modded, getting it to work on 360, and like someone did a pad hack on it and had to solder the connections on it and stuff, and well, they did an okay job, but it took a long
Yeah.
time too. Um,
Yeah.
and so I remember my like years later being like, ultimately that shit didn't matter whatsoever, and it matters less so now in 2022 as far as like
Yeah.
what do you need to be successful, because I would actually argue that stick is uh the most disadvantageous peripheral that is available for modern fighting games. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of a wild journey for me as an 09er to be like, oh, I went from being like I need to stick to fit in to
Yeah.
now I deliberately need to not use a stick. So
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that in terms of like fitting in because like I didn't really have any anything like that, any feelings like that. Because like I said,
sure.
I was playing on the 360 pad, like, it was kind of like, yeah, there were people in my scene that had sticks, but then one of the top two guys in my scene, he didn't play on stick at all. He played on one of those the Mad Catz fight pads that were like a
Oh
Sega Genesis
yeah.
controller, the 6 button facing ones.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was that was my friend Shinji, and he was easily top two in our scene, and he was playing with one of those. So there was never that kind of feeling like I needed to have that. It was
Oh,
more kind
cool.
of like a personal preference, yeah. So, but
I actually,
I forget what I was
if
gonna
I could
say.
bring home a point for that one too, is that
Yeah,
it is actually worth noting the culture of the scene is defined by the top players of the scene. And
yeah,
so like that's part of the strength of our podcast too, is that we do get to we have the opportunity to interview a lot of top players of that particular time period, and we can get
yeah,
their perspective too on what it meant to them for people to be using sticks or whatnot, or how they define the culture. And by and large, like if you look at the folks we've had on the show, like Scott and Jeff and Rick and Steve and Sean and company, like anybody who's like a figurehead or a top player in their scene, like they're all really good dudes. I've noticed.
yeah,
Like I think that's why our scene's so healthy, is that the top players kind of like give back to the community.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's sidebar there. So
No,
anyway,
no, that's cool. It's just like you brought up Markman too, and in terms of like the introduction of the Mad Cats and stuff,
yeah,
um, during Street Fighter 4, and like, I mean, I don't know. It's probably, I mean, it'll be a better episode or another episode of the podcast to talk to somebody in terms of like the transition to stuff like that. I mean, that's something that I ended up like personally researching or looking through like the Shoryuken forums in terms of like um how that kind of ushered in like a whole new era, right? Because like I remember when I was like modding that Mad Catz SE,
yeah,
like to find parts like Sanwa parts, like nowadays we have what Focus Attack, we got Arcade Shock. There's numerous other places. Paradise Arcade Shop, I think, is one.
yep. You
There's
just
other
named all
places.
three.
Yeah, there's places where you can get stuff. You can even buy Sanwa buttons on Amazon now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, you can. It's
yeah,
nuts, dude. Yeah,
you can buy stuff, and like I remember when I was modding that SE, like I think one place was called like Lizard Lick, like that
yep.
was
I
like an
remember
American
Lizard
based
Lake.
place. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
Lizard
yeah.
Lick, and then or you could order like directly from Japan from like Akibara Shop, I think is what it was called, and
Yeah,
like
nowadays they actually have those European or like it's like a Dutch site or something where you can actually like what they do is they ship the buttons from Japan to Europe and then ship it from Europe to America, and it ends up being
oh
cheaper as far as the import tariffs go. And
I didn't
so
know
there's
I
a
didn't even know. I
whole
mean I haven't bought
yeah,
anything recently, so
yeah, there's a whole, because right now, like even now, Sanwa is considered base, right? Like that's what Mark Julio did, is he made Sanwa the standard, and
yeah,
now everyone's trying to get into mechanical buttons. Like the latest thing, if you like, I went to Evo recently, and everybody's all up on mechanical switches, and it's
yeah,
coinciding with that that keyboard hobbyist thing that's rising up right now too, where everybody's making their own custom keyboards. It's
Yeah.
frankly, it's just another thing for nerds to spend money on. I have this theory that nerds all ended up in these really high-paying IT jobs, and so because of that, now all the hobbyist stuff that you can just have all your spendable income go towards, like all of it's catered towards that shit. So mechanical keyboards, mechanical switch, cherry switches, and all the different like brands and colors of switches and stuff, like that stuff is starting to get into the buttons. Like people are putting like rather than Sanwa buttons, they're doing like buttons with a keycap, like or a keycap with a micro switch on top, and for in case of the snack box. But even in my hitbox, like which is using traditional buttons, it's a traditional button but with a micro switch inside, so it's a Semduxa button. Like that's the latest like thing that people have been doing lately. It's just been adding mechanical buttons to everything. I don't like them, but that's the fad.
Yeah, I think I tried. I don't know if I tried. I think I did try certain other buttons, but then like for me, I just ended up kind of gravitating back to the Sanwas.
Sanwas. Yeah, and you're a Honda player, right? So HHS is really important, or like being able to piano, like being able to hit like light punch, medium punch, heavy punch, light punch, right? Is your piano combo?
Yeah, well,
Or
no, not for me personally. We talked about that before.
oh,
I was
you
doing like
slide.
a
Yeah,
no,
you
no, I wasn't
slide.
even sliding. No, no, no. I was doing the like triple jab and like double fierce, and you guys were like that. You even said you were like that sounds really slow, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I could see it, but
I remember now
that's
because I
just
remember being like, "Oh, Benny sometimes gets EX hands. Like that's just a Benny thing. Is he'll just get EX hands." And I remember that's the
yeah,
side effect of your technique is you just get EX hands.
yeah,
That's funny. Oh man.
yeah. I don't know. It's just something like I mean, muscle memory is a hell of a thing, man. Like I
Yeah.
like it's just something that I got used to, and then like like I said, um, I
What
got
if they
accused
make
of using turbo for that.
hands
So
quarter circle in Street Fighter 6? Are you gonna lose your mind?
no, I think I'll be okay with it. It's not um I mean, it's definitely something that's a little bit more just intuitive in terms of like, just playing like gravitating between characters, right? Especially like from playing Dalton. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
true
like,
too.
or playing Ryu on the side in 4 just messing around like, it's something that would be natural. I mean, it might take a little bit to be like, all right, I got to do whatever crouch medium and then quarter circle forward, to get hands and I'll be like, "Huh?" Like that just seems weird, but,
Yeah. I will say, as somebody who plays a similar character, like I play Chun, right? And one of the things that kept me from playing Chun in Street Fighter 4 is like I didn't want to do piano combos into Link
Yeah.
into Crouch Fierce into more piano combo into Link into Crouch Fierce. Like I don't
Mm,
know, doing Crouch Fierce into legs is really hard. With
yeah.
respectfully, Honda jab hands. The jab is part of the input, right? The
Yeah.
jab is part of the 100 hands input. So you need like 6 inputs, right? For
Yeah.
Chun, you don't get that. You get Crouch Fierce, and that's not part of the input. So you got to do the rest of the inputs like manually. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
didn't
yeah, one
like
thing
that.
I think one thing that people did with those particular type of situations was to like maybe press fierce and short at the same time
Link it,
to
yeah,
kind of mask that input. Yeah.
yeah,
And because like I know people that did that too in terms of like certain Honda combos, like if they needed to like hit like fierce to start, then they
yeah.
would like mask it with other buttons because the heavies would take priority over the other stuff.
Oh man, that actually ruins some of the mystique a little bit. So what you do is you'd plink Fierce with medium punch, right? And then that would count as 2 inputs on your hands, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like yeah, for instance,
Fucking
like
Honda players are cheaters, man.
because Honda did like the
Ah!
was it the crouch medium kick, right? The low forward.
Yeah.
Like that
Okay,
would
that
that
doesn't
would be
count
like
towards your
the
hands. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So like you do like the cross up body splash and then uh whatever like like crouch medium kick and then like at the same time like I personally would push hit jab at the same time and then that would be the one time that I could actually like kind of piano inputs is because I was like masking that in there.
huh. Okay. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but
you
that was
you
me personally.
low forward plus jab. Okay, I see it. I see it. Man, even
Yeah,
then you could still cheat. I guess so. That's probably what the Chun players would do. Is they do probably like low fierce into short, low fierce and short at the same time, and the piano into yeah. Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense.
So yeah,
But anyway, my point was that for Street Fighter 5, like Chun just like it became quarter circle forward, and it's so much better. It's so much easier, man. And now I can play Chun Li, and I don't have to worry about doing all that other bullshit. It's great. I think piano needs to go away as an input. I think DP needs to go away too, but that'll get me in hot water with the internet.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Because I mean, we were talking about that too in terms of like the way inputs are going nowadays in terms of like like the down inputs and things like that. Like that's something that's becoming more prevalent. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess for me, like when learning a new game, like if that's the input that it is, then for me, it's not that's not something to difficult for me to kind of like to do, right? But if
Hmm.
it's something like legacy game for me, like Street Fighter, like if you were gonna be like, oh yeah, Ryu's gonna be down punch, and I'm like, what? I was like, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Like,
Yeah, I get you.
that'll throw me off for sure.
Yeah, you got to like that's actually a hard thing with every new Street Fighter that comes out, and I'm sure with every new fighting game that comes out is that like how do you balance legacy stuff that was deliberately obfuscated at times, oftentimes to allow for more quarters to be inputted into the machine, right?
Yeah,
It's like you might have lost because of this combo because you dropped your combo because the combo was hard, but we got your quarter for that reason, and so if you want to do that combo, you're gonna put another quarter in, right? So
yeah,
I think a lot of times the difficulty is artificial because of the arcade roots, but I will recognize that there's some showmanship in being able to execute a hard combo and everything. I just think that like in today's day and age, like we don't need to do piano. Like we can do quarter circle. Quarter circle is
yeah,
something that it's the standard that I think everybody's agreed on. Where it's like it's just hard enough to be like, okay, this takes effort, but
yeah,
not hard enough where it's like everyone's crying about it being too easy.
yeah. Well, I think you
Unlike
could
a deep
always
down input or
layer.
something.
Yeah, I mean, you can always layer things into that too. Like, I mean, four had like the FADC stuff, or
Yeah,
5 had a lot of those like micro walk kind of things where it's like do this and then you gotta like micro walk, and I'm just like that stuff. Like me personally, like that's beyond me.
yeah,
That's
I
not
get you.
something that I do. But it's like I see stuff and it's just like on the surface, like you're just like, oh, that's a cool combo. But then you look at like the technical part of it, and it's just like, well, in order for me to do this, it requires all of these little things, and I'm like, oh, okay, so
Yeah,
there's a lot more behind it.
I mean that notion is basically my argument for the hitbox debate, which is yeah, you can cry about SOCD inputs being unfair, but uh, the actual like mechanical stuff that's required to execute that is actually kind of hard. Um, it's
Yeah,
something simple like you know I forgot to put my ring finger down. It's not that I forgot to block because everyone's instinction like you forget to you don't realize how instinctive holding back to block on a stick is until you play
yeah,
hitbox when you have to do something more active like holding buttons down. When you hold buttons
yeah,
down, like that's a more deliberate choice for blocking versus a stick where you just hold down back because that's what you're supposed to do. And
yeah,
I don't think people understand that, and I think people that's what gets people to buy the hitbox and then drop it immediately after a month is they forget like they don't a lot of the instinctive stuff that comes with stick, the natural stuff that probably
yeah,
that G likes doesn't
yeah,
come with hitbox naturally.
yeah. So yeah, it's something to be said in terms of like things being intuitive, right? Like just like you said,
It's
it's a
not.
natural thing. Like, oh,
It's
how do I block? Well, if I walk backwards or if I hold away, that's a more natural kind of like thing for people to kind of put in their minds and kind
yep.
of just
But
put together.
from a hitbox standpoint, I'm holding down left or down right, and those are two fundamentally different motions because you're using three different fingers for that. And
Yeah,
that's where the mindset changes. But I don't think a lot of people get that because they're so focused on the SOCD inputs.
yeah,
Yeah,
I can see it. Oh man.
yeah. All that to say is I have officially exhausted my drink. This thing's been empty for a little while, but our conversation has been hella killer this whole time. I think we got to do more mini episodes, man.
Yeah, we probably try to like we were talking about that too in terms of possibly bringing somebody else on too, and again just like talking, just having a conversation kind of thing. Not really, not that we're really kind of rigid in anything that we've done. It's like we kind of have guardrails or guidelines or stuff like that in terms of things we want to talk about. But yeah, I know a couple people that would like to come on and probably just shoot the shit with us or whatever.
I think the important thing, the distinction between this and a normal episode is that oftentimes with the normal episode, we are restricted by time. Like we mentioned that you have to work, and afterwards I have to edit the video and stuff like that. But then also that like the show is about the guest at that point, right? They're talking
Yeah,
about their background, their history, and then whatever hot topic they want to talk about at the time. And
yeah,
so there are often times that you and I, we have our ideas, but we are providing a service for the audience to elevate the guest and less so more about elevating ourselves. We'll interject our own personal opinions and whatnot,
yeah,
but these drinks episodes I think represent a way for us to kind of it's a safety valve, right? Where it's like last week Tanner and I went on that tirade about NFTs, right? And I'm like, I have a lot more to say about some of the stuff we didn't talk about, like Hitbox and stuff like that. And so these drinks episodes are a good way to get some of John and Benny's opinions about things after we've had the initial experience with the guests.
yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, I could see it. Yeah, we'll definitely be looking at reaching out to some people and seeing if we can coordinate something in terms of getting them on for these kind of episodes. Because like, yeah, I think that's a like you said, it's a good outlet for us, and then even for some of the people like we've had on as guests. Like, I mean, I'm sure they would like uh they wouldn't mind coming on and like kind of having something that's a little bit not as guided or as interview kind of style. It's kind of just like discussing things or whatever whatever comes to
yep,
mind kind of deal.
yep. Like I think these drinks episodes end up being more roundtable than interview, I guess, and that's that's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
I think one thing worth noting here is that um the drinks episodes tend to be shorter than the average episode, but this one ended up being longer just because we have so much to talk about, and it's been a while
yeah,
since we've done one.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
But another thing that worth noting here is that ordinarily when we're doing these episodes, right, Benny and I have a script at the end where we say, all right, let's segue it out. Let's talk about the next guest. And right now, I think he and I are both trying to figure out the right way to end this episode. And so we're trying to find the right way to segue it out. But the problem is there's no guest. There's no guest for us to be like, hey, I hope you come back. Do you want to shout out anything while we gather our thoughts? The reality here is
yeah.
I think we're out of things to talk about.
Yeah, that's for today. I mean, I was actually just about to segue out, but
Oh, okay.
no, I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, these drinks episodes, like you said, I mean, it's kind of here and there. Like we don't have a regular schedule for when we're gonna do them. It's
Yep.
kind of like, hey, do you want to do one of these, or time to get some stuff off of our chest or outlet here and there.
Yep.
But yeah, for this week, actually on Thursday was it the 21st or no, the 22nd
22nd,
because
I
it's
recall.
Monday. Yeah,
Yeah,
my days are all messed up working at night.
sure.
But yeah, the 22nd, we are going to be talking to Ninja Nam. I mean, I think I mentioned that in our last episode anyway.
Yep.
So we're going to talk to him. We don't have, honestly, like, we have some people in mind going forward, but still trying to iron that out.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that we talked about prior to this episode that I want to kind of let our audience know is that, we are on episode 12 now. I think by and large we've kind of talked through like what our format was, and the feedback that we've gotten so far is that this format really like resonates with people as far as the interview format, the player spotlights, and the conversation that happens. But if there's anything that you all want to hear, or like we're gearing up to start the next season pretty soon here, and we would love to hear some ideas of like potential guests or potential things you would like to hear us talk about. And so if there's any feedback you can give us whatsoever, feel free to comment on this YouTube video. Feel free to send it to us personally. Like if you're a listener, you probably know who we are, and you can probably you can message us on Twitter. You can message us on Facebook. Any way, like because we've been getting some suggestions from our audience, and we would love to keep hearing from you guys on what you want to hear. Because if that's
Most
the case, it
definitely.
allows us to tune the show. We can still talk about the things that we like talking about, but then tune it to something that in a way that would make it more palatable to the audience here. So please give us that feedback. Please let us know what guests you want on. Please let us know what topics you'd like us to cover, and
Yeah.
we can only go up here from here. I think with season 2.
Yep.
Cool. Alrighty, so I guess we'll call it here, and we'll see you guys on Thursday. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll talk to you later.
Yep. See you, John.
See ya.